You've spent most of your life performing a version of yourself that was never quite yours, not because you're fake, not because you don't care, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that the quiet version of you, the one who needed hours alone, the one who thought before speaking, the one who felt everything twice, that version made other people uncomfortable, so you adjusted. You learned to smile a little quicker, to fill the silence, to say yes when your whole body was whispering no. And now, years later, you find yourself exhausted in ways that sleep cannot fix, and you don't quite know when the performance began or how to stop. If any part of that lands, this video is for you. There is a specific kind of tiredness that comes from being an INFJ shaped by extrovert expectations. It doesn't look like burnout in the traditional sense. It looks like a life that works on paper, a calendar that stays full, friendships that seem healthy from the outside, a career that makes sense, and underneath all of it, a quiet, persistent ache, a sense that you're living someone else's rhythm inside your own body. Let's name what's actually happening. The world we live in rewards a very particular nervous system, fast responders, quick talkers, people who think out loud, who network easily, who recover from social contact within minutes instead of days. This is what culture calls normal. And if your inner life doesn't match that pace, you're often told, subtly from childhood, that something about you needs adjusting. Susan Cain wrote about this at length in her book, Quiet. She called it the extrovert ideal, the belief woven quietly into schools and workplaces and even friendships that the ideal self is sociable, dominant, and comfortable in the spotlight. And when you grow up inside that ideal without matching it, you don't just feel different, you feel wrong. So you start to perform. Here is the first sign you might recognize. You have a public self and a private self, and the gap between them is enormous. Around others, you're warm, engaged, attentive, maybe even funny. You know how to hold a room, but the moment you close the door behind you, something collapses. Not sadness, exactly, more like a body finally allowed to exhale after holding its breath for hours. That collapse isn't weakness. It's the nervous system releasing the effort of translation, because for an INFJ, every social interaction is a small act of translation, turning inner depth into outer accessibility, turning slow processing into quick response, turning nuance into something bite-sized enough for the moment. The second sign, you've been called too quiet, too intense, too sensitive, or too much in your head, and you believe them. Not consciously, maybe, but somewhere you internalize the idea that your natural way of being needed apology, so you learn to shrink certain parts and inflate others. You became more talkative than felt right, more available than felt sustainable, more agreeable than felt honest, and the cost of that adjustment is something almost invisible. It's a slow loss of contact with your own signal. The third sign, you get invited to things and immediately feel two contradictory feelings at once. A flicker of warmth that someone thought of you, and a heavy sinking dread at the thought of actually going. You say yes anyway, because saying no feels like failing a test you didn't sign up for. And then you spend the days leading up to the event, mentally rehearsing your energy, budgeting your words, preparing the version of you that will show up. That preparation itself is exhausting long before you've spoken to anyone. The fourth sign, you've built a life that looks social, full of people, plans, obligations, but you feel deeply, chronically lonely inside it. This is one of the strangest paradoxes of the INFJ trapped in extrovert expectations. You're surrounded and yet unmet, because the kind of connection that actually feeds you, slow, deep, one-on-one, unhurried, is not the kind of connection your calendar is built around. The neuroscientist John Cacioppo, who spent decades studying loneliness, found something important. Loneliness isn't about how many people are around you. It's about the gap between the connection you have and the connection you need. And for an INFJ, that gap can be enormous, even in a room full of people who love you. The fifth sign, you feel guilty for needing what you need, guilty for canceling, guilty for wanting a quiet weekend, guilty for not wanting to hop on the call, guilty for taking 3 days to reply to a message that only required a sentence. The guilt is often louder than the need itself, which is exactly why the need never gets fully honored. And here is what I want you to hear clearly. Your need for solitude is not selfishness. It is not avoidance. It is not a character flaw dressed up as a preference. It is the way your specific nervous system metabolizes the world. Elaine Aron, the psychologist who coined the term highly sensitive person, found that roughly 1 in 5 people process sensory and emotional information more deeply than the rest. And when you process more deeply, you also need more recovery. Not because you're fragile, because you're doing more internal work per moment than the environment gives you credit for. The extrovert ideal was never built with your nervous system in mind. That doesn't mean your nervous system is broken. It means the ideal is incomplete. The sixth sign is subtler and often the most painful. You've forgotten what you actually want, not what you should want, not what looks good from the outside, not what would make people proud of you, but what you, in your quietest, most honest self, actually long for. Because when you spend years performing a version of yourself, the signal from your true self gets faint, not lost, just faint, waiting. And the work, if we can even call it work, is not to become someone new. It's to stop overriding the person you already are. That might look like allowing yourself to leave a gathering early without explanation, or saying no to a Friday plan, because Friday is when your body most needs silence, or letting a message sit for a day because you don't yet have the words, or admitting that one deep conversation with one trusted person nourishes you more than a month of small talk with 20. None of this is dramatic. There is no grand reveal, just a slow, patient turning back toward yourself, choice by choice, silence by silence. Because here is the truth beneath all of it. You were never meant to be a louder version of yourself. You were meant to be a fuller version of yourself. And fullness, for an INFJ, is quiet. It is inward. It is slow. It is deep. It is the opposite of everything the extrovert ideal celebrates. And it is not less. It is simply other. Your system works the way it does, and it doesn't need fixing. If this resonated, if any part of it named something you've been carrying quietly for years, know that you're not alone. There are more of us than it feels like, moving at an inner pace, thinking in slow spirals, needing days to recover from what the world calls a normal evening. And this channel exists so that version of you has somewhere to rest. If you'd like more reflections like this, you're welcome to subscribe. No urgency, only if it feels right. A quiet place for deep minds.